all for giving up your Saturday to be here to campaign for education, because it's about our future and the future of our children all over this country. And I thank all the unions that have become involved in this, the NEU, the NEHT, the ASCL, the UCU, GMB, and my own union, Unison. I'm a member of Unison. I've got the card up, it's okay. And of course all the parent groups that have come together. And because it is the parent groups that come together with those that work in schools that really are the power behind this campaign, which is making such a difference to the national conversation about education. I am a member, as I said, of Unison, and I think by just merely saying that shows that we recognise, all of us do in this wonderful room here today, that a school is a team. It's a team of people. It is the cleaners, it's those that prepare the meals, it's those that work in the office, it's those that repair the building, it's the teaching assistants, the teachers, and of course the very, very important role of head teacher. And I think when we are in our schools, I always make this point to children in primary schools when I go to the Year 6 Leavers Assembly, thank the entire team, because in that old saying, African saying, it takes a village to bring up a child. It takes a community to bring up a child, and we should recognise that and thank everyone. So the real experts are the people who work in education, and education is of course a means of personal improvement, but it's also a way of bringing about social justice in our society. A couple of weeks ago we had a very important conference in Birmingham that we organised from my party, the Labour Party, to discuss education issues but also to discuss social justice. And we decided we would change the principle of the Commission for Social Mobility into a Commission for Social Justice. So I think it's important. Recognise the needs of all children in all situations to get the very best out of the education system. And so an over-competitive environment means that children lose out. Children lose out on exam choices and career choices in school, and that affects them for the rest of their lives. And so I'm very keen that we approach education with the principle that every single child that comes through the nursery or school gate deserves and must get the absolute very best that we, all of us, can give them. And it's also about the poverty that some of our children face, because it cannot be right that some of our children arrive in school hungry in the morning. If the school provides breakfast, good. But if it doesn't, they don't get any, unless a teacher or somebody decides to help them out of the goodness of their heart. I thank all those that do. They shouldn't have to do it. So it is an issue about poverty within our society as well, and that's why I'm equally concerned about the way in which universal credit operates, and the way in which the two-child policy operates, and the poverty with which many of our children face school. Because school has to be a place where they can achieve the very best. And so first of all, let's ensure that our schools are properly funded, and so that the cuts that have been made and the so-called fair funding formula, I mean, goodness, George Orwell could have written that, couldn't he? The fair funding formula is anything but fair, and with the increase in school numbers, the actual spending per head has fallen rather than risen. The first time, I think, in my lifetime, that the school funding per pupil has actually fallen in many parts of the country. That is simply wrong. We're not a poor country, but we do have massive inequality within our country. That is what has to change. So I thank all those teachers, head teachers and parent groups that do so much to fundraise to support their school. It's good. There's nothing wrong in that. We all want to support our local schools. And I, as a local MP, go to the annual school events and support them and so on. And they raise money for add-ons and special things for the school. That's fine. But it should never become a means of the core funding the school be provided by the You're all experienced in the education sector, so you understand it better than I do, but a school in a poor area might put a huge amount of effort into a school summer fair and raise 500 or 1,000 quid. They work really hard to achieve it. A school in a richer area puts the same amount of effort in and raises 5,000 or 10,000 pounds at an event. Now, that just explains the levels of inequality and poverty within our society. Schools can't change everything, but if they're properly funded, can make sure every child gets a decent opportunity in school. And that's why I'm keen that we should encourage a well-rounded education system that fosters the joy of learning. And so we thought about this a great deal and looked at other education systems in other countries and other parts of the world. And I think the stress levels that are put on children at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 are excessive. The stresses put on teachers system of teacher appraisal of children rather than a SAT system. So we would end the SAT system. It's also about what children do in schools. And I'm passionate in my belief that children have the most amazing levels of imagination, particularly primary school children, when they're free to roam with their minds, all the things they could do. And reading poetry to young children, I think, is fascinating and humbling sometimes. But it's that sense of the creative spirit they have, the creative spirits in poetry and in music, that we should never stifle, we should indeed encourage. And that's why I'm very keen to ensure that we redevelop the principle of good quality musical education for all children. So that there's a ring-fence money for art and music education, which could, of course, lead on to spending in local theatres as well, if that's what they want to do, but the principle being that no child should be excluded from learning a musical instrument because their parents can't afford to do it. As you know, we have proposed a national education service. The principle behind it is that education should be a collective good, something that we as a society provide for each other, in much the same way as the National Health Service is a collective good for all of us, where we provide it, we all pay into it, knowing that it's there for all of us. I want us to have the same thought process on education. We pay it now for the nursery and primary and secondary schools, but further along the line, and to some extent in nurseries, we end up paying for it, and at universities we pay a great deal for it. I want us to have a national education service that will ensure we end tuition fees, that we do have further investment in college education, and that we recreate the family of education through the local education authority, where the schools are responsible to and replace it with the right to education. But also, and this is an area that we need to think about a bit more, when the media talk of education and talk of achievements, they often say ex-pupil of former pupil of the local secondary school, local primary school, has done really well. They've gone to university, they've got a degree, and he says the degree they've got. Great, well done them. Yes, it is a great achievement. They have worked very hard for it, and they should be applauded for doing it. But it should also be the case that if the young person decides to go down a vocational route and gets an amazingly strong qualification in aeronautical engineering and computer science, all those sort of areas, that is of equal value to those that are is removing the corporations from the classroom by ending academies and achieved if you've got a strong, trained and well-motivated workforce. And I find it very sad, the number of young teachers I meet who've trained to do the job they want to do. They love the buzz of the classroom, they love the buzz of the school atmosphere. But the pressures on them are so great, the stress on them is so great, that far too many leave the profession after a very short time. We are losing brilliant teachers of tomorrow because we haven't supported them enough and put too much stress and pressure on them in those early years when they're a newly qualified teacher. We've got to change the way in which we treat the workforce. And the only thing teachers in England work longer hours than anywhere in the world except Japan, and half of all secondary school teachers say in confidence their job is unmanageable. And so we've got to look at that, look also at the loss of teaching assistant jobs and support staff, which also impacts on the ability to teach and the ability to, in a classroom, to make sure you've got that support. It's obviously much easier to teach a mixed ability class if you've got good teaching assistants with you. Very unlikely if you have. To the young people, the motivation on education is very, very important, to value education. I remember taking a group of children to the Arsenal Stadium who had having achievement difficulties in school, and Arsenal were helping them with extra classes after school to improve maths and English. It was very, very good. And if they got through that, their reward was to go to the stadium and meet the players. And the one who handled it best was Patrick Vieira, who sat down with a group of children for over an hour talking to them about his life, his growing up in an African village and the poverty with which he grew up in. And he said, to me, my school and education was absolutely everything. It was my pathway to be able to achieve something in life. And I think we just have to respect those people that we can bring into schools and classrooms to inspire our children to understand the joy of learning, the joy of reading, the joy of the imagination that goes with it. So, I'm spending the summer campaigning to end austerity and the underfunding of public services across this country. And we'll also be campaigning for economic development through a green industrial revolution, creating the jobs and the new skills we require in the future at the same time as recognising the global environmental and climate emergency that we all face. Education and understanding is part of that, and so we do also need to look at our school curriculum, at the way in which we teach history, at the way in which we teach issues surrounding the global climate crisis, and make sure that in conclusion, I just say this. Free education came about in Britain because people campaigned for it. Initially, education was only provided either by churches or to the sons, mainly, in some cases the daughters, of the very wealthy. It was those campaigns in the 19th century that brought about universal education from the 1870 Education Act. And it was parental campaigns that brought about changes in development, that brought about the raising of the school leaving age, investment in education, and I'm pleased to say eventually brought us comprehensive education, which I absolutely passionately support. And it's the involvement of the entire community in supporting our schools and our teachers that can make sure we can put the pressure on this government in the autumn spending statement to refund the schools properly so we don't go into next year with yet another cut in spending per head within our schools, but also fund education properly for the future. If we continue down the path, the economic path of austerity, it will lead to greater inequality, it will lead to greater inequality in our schools, it will lead to more underfunding in our schools, it will lead to more and more underachievement. And when you underfund a school, at one level all children lose out, but the ones who lose out the most are those that often come from the poorest backgrounds, or those that have the greatest needs. Those that are special needs children, those that have disabilities also lose out, as a school then can't properly fund the Senko or have a completely dedicated Senko for each school. These things are very, very important, and they absolutely matter. So all of us in our campaigning work can develop and change public opinion so that we put the resources we absolutely need in the most important and valuable place possible. And that is the children and young people in our schools. They, after all, are our future. And it's my pleasure to be here to share a few thoughts with you today. Thank you very much.